Critical rate and critical damage may be the two most important stats when building a champion in Raid. Finally, he sleeps here. You may know me from my FIFA Mobile YouTube videos and Twitch streams, but I'm also crazy addicted to Raid Shadow Legends. There are a ton of videos out there on Raid, but since the game's been out for a while, most of what you're going to find is for the advanced player, and if you're relatively new to the game, most of that info makes the game seem more confusing than it should be. That's what this series is. Simple tips for those beginning Raid. Tips that will make the journey quicker and easier. That way when you're ready for the more advanced stuff, those videos don't feel like they're trying to teach you how to rebuild a compression inlet on a jet engine. Not even sure if a jet engine has a compression inlet, but that's the scenario I've got, so I'm sticking with it. Now, two of the stats that your champions have are critical rate and critical damage. Now, the first big question is, what the hell do those even mean? There are 4 different types of hits in Raid. You got to understand that first. We have weak, normal, strong, and critical. Now, a weak hit, that's 30% less damage than normal, and that happens at specific points during the game. Normal hits are, well, they're normal. It's just a normal hit based on your champion's attack stats. Now, sometimes they can have a strong hit, which increases damage by 30%, and then a critical hit is the big daddy. That deals an extra load of damage equal to your champion's critical damage stat. Now let's take a look at a rare champion that many of you started with or have come across early in the stages of the game. Now you can see here that his critical damage totals to 122% with his base level plus his bonuses. This means when a critical hit is scored, he'll be dealing his base damage plus 122%. Now, if he normally does, let's say 3,000 damage, a critical hit would then be 6,720 or 3,000 plus 122% of 3,000, which is another 3,720. See, this is one reason critical damage is so important. 122% is fantastic, but honestly, I would like to trade out some of his gear here and get that number closer to 200%. 200% on critical damage is the target I would love to hit with any damage dealing champion. Now, critical rate is actually even more important than critical damage. This is the rate at which your champion can land critical hits. Now, you want your critical rate at 100% at least, so that way any hit you deal against a like affinity or lower affinity champion results in a critical hit where you earn that critical damage percentage bonus. Now you can see this champion is at 101% on his critical rate when you add his base and his bonus. That means whenever he attacks any champion that is not part of the force affinity, which are the red ones, he'll land a critical hit. Now this is due to the affinity advantage and disadvantage wheel. I'll make a video on affinities in the coming weeks. For now, just remember that when you have an affinity disadvantage, there's always a 35% chance that your hit will be weak, no matter what your critical rate is. You can't overcome that stat. That's just how math works. All right, now we know how important those two stats are. Now let's take a look and talk about how to get them where they need to be. Critical rate is a substat on many of the gear you can find, or a substat that is added once your gear is upgraded. So there's also gear that gives you a bonus on critical rate when you have it in use in your required sets. Now, if you look at the critical rate, any of the critical rate gear, it's a set that requires 2, and it adds 12% to your critical rate. So now let's say you put 4 of them on a champion. That's going to give you a bonus of 24%. If you put 6, that's 3 sets. That would be 36% critical rate. Not that I'm suggesting you do any of that. Obviously, no. Now, there are also things like gauntlets that are out there with critical rate stack. Actually, gauntlets are the one artifact that you can find pretty readily with critical rate as a main stat. It's the only one that you can find with critical rate as their main stat, not just a substat. And remember that, that's important. Now that we know how important critical rate is, I suggest you focus on your gauntlets with critical rate, unless you can make up the difference to 100% somewhere else. Gauntlets can also have critical damage as their main stat, which is great when you have a heavy hitter or you already found a way to get 100% critical rate through other gear and bonuses. But critical rate in the beginning stages of the game, having critical rate as your main stat for gauntlets is pretty much a must. Now, you're going to need to pay attention to the amulets as well. They are another piece of gear that can have the critical damage main stat. If you have critical rate on your gauntlets and then critical damage on your amulet, and you train those things out and you max them at 16, level 16, that's going to make a huge difference in your champion's ability to deal damage. All right, now I hope that information helped. If it did, make sure you subscribe here at YouTube and turn on notifications so you never miss a video when it goes live. I'll be putting these beginner guides for Raid together weekly this year, as well as including it into my rotation of games at Twitch. Thanks a lot for hanging out, and as always, as long as you guys keep watching, I'll keep making videos.